All right, welcome to Bet the Edge. I'm Jay Crouch here as always with Drew Dinsick. Different location today. We're going to run through Texans-Ravens, Chiefs-Bills, Bucs-Lions. Now that we know all of the matchups, but first, Drew, how did you enjoy the Monday games? Bills-Steelers and Bucs-Eagles.
The early game was weird, not just because it was a Monday and there was football on at 4 in the afternoon, but the outcome and the way the game kind of unfolded was bizarre. The result was not good for me. I would have loved a backdoor there by the Steelers, but you can cut it two ways. The margin of victory was 14 points, and the Steelers basically gave the Bills 14 points with the George Pickens fumble and the pick in the end zone. So, maybe the game was closer than the final score said, but at the same time, every time it felt like the Bills needed to do something, they did it and they made it look easy. So I think ultimately, clearly the right side won. If you bet some over once they changed the date of the game, congratulations. That was one of the easier bets of the weekend. That said, Bills are a really interesting handicap against the Chiefs this week. So many thoughts, and I can't wait to hear what you have to say about that as well. The nightcap for me with the Bucs could not have gone any better. I had an under in that one that got home. I had the Bucs money line that got home in exotics. So that was a huge result. And we get to I honestly put the Eagles out of their misery. I think it's better for everyone that we don't have to kind of figure out what's going on there anymore, and they could use a break. So, I'm kind of happy to move on from Philadelphia.
Yeah, I can't remember an in-season collapse of that ilk. I have to think back to like the New York Mets blowing the NFC East in like 2007, that kind of stuff, to see that a team so completely collapsed. Still don't understand why their defense fell off so much from last year when it was an elite unit. I don't know what happened to James Bradbury. I guess he just got old really fast. And they were like, they turned into an extreme example of the Cowboys, where if they're not getting quick pressure, then there's just nothing there. There's absolutely nothing in the back seven. And you could see it last night. Like, the only times the defense worked was when they were sacking Baker Mayfield. And if they didn't sack him, then it was just game over. So bizarre sequence of games for Philadelphia, bizarre season for Jalen Hurts. It's the 2022 Hurts season where he was the MVP favorite before he got hurt really late in the year. It looks so incongruous with what he did in 21 and 23, because this year he's just looked like the guy that he was in 2021. He looks so indecisive. The safety that he took was about as bad a place I can remember, given that the game, it was still in the balance at that point. It was 16-9. It's a one-score game. The Bucs are not this absolute force that you think is going to march down the field every single time, though they were having success. And if he just throws the ball away and they punt, then maybe it's still a game. But to your point, it really did feel like a team that was ready to be put out of its misery. And we move on. And as someone who in the comeback player of the year market is heavily on Damar Hamlin and Baker Mayfield, could have used that performance, Baker, in week 17 or week 18. Because I don't think he's going to win the award now, but he could have if he served that up against the Panthers in week 18.
Yeah, one final thought on the postmortem for the Eagles defense. I do think the defense regression from last year was pretty predictable, because the defense was inflated in a lot of people's eyes because they played a schedule of very, very easy quarterbacks last year, combined with the fact that they were in extremely positive game states. Like, that team was up 20 points in the second half of almost every game they were in last year, particularly in the regular season. And then, of course, got to play, the Niners without Brock Purdy in the NFC Championship game. So like, things really, really broke favorably for the Eagles in terms of helping kind of, just really inflate the perception of that defense last year. And then in the offseason, they had to choose between bringing back the linebacking core, bringing back the secondary, and they elected to bring back the secondary. And those guys did not perform well, namely Bradbury and Slay. Without linebackers and without outstanding safety play, the spine of the defense was just nothing to really write home about. And that became a problem the deeper they went in the season and the more people kind of figured out how you wanted to attack that unit. And then all of a sudden, if you're not in a especially positive game state, then the pass rush doesn't really matter. It only really mattered last night on third downs when it was like third and long and an obvious passing down. Well, those are, that's when, they got to thrive the entirety of last year. So, I think it was relatively predictable. Certainly Roseman needs to probably come under a little bit of scrutiny for, how he's populated some of the defensive decisions they've made in the draft. And if those guys don't come good, then, then they're going to be taking a major step backwards. But I don't think Jalen Hurts deserves the criticism that he's getting broadly. And it's mostly, he was injured. We knew he was hurt. He was a one-dimensional player as far as, where he was able to attack on the field compared to last year. And I think it won't be I won't be surprised, at least if we hear, kind of rumblings that, oh yeah, actually he was more hurt than we really realized, and he's going to be, having some off-season surgery to get right, particularly with some of the knee pain that was clearly limiting him. So, it was a tough game to go into without your number one wide receiving threat, which is why it was still very, very, very tough to rationalize why the Eagles were 3-point favorites yesterday. And I think ultimately, not being results biased, it's still kind of a mystery to me why the Bucs were dogs at home in that one.
Yeah, I think ultimately just a big part of that had to be just Baker Mayfield's health, and he did not resemble at all the guy who showed up in Carolina and was limping around and just couldn't throw the ball 10 yards downfield. But from the first few plays, you could tell he was just playing with a completely different just level of health, level of just zip, the way he's moving around, level of decisiveness. And yeah, it's definitely a fair comment about the Eagles defense. It's still they were the fourth best defense in the NFL last year by EPA per play, and this year they were 30th. And Bradbury was second team All Pro last year, and this year he's played close to the worst cornerback in football. And I mean, it's kind of sad, really, because in interviews he comes off very well and he takes ownership. But I mean, it's just absolutely brutal. The tackling, what is he tackling guys around their shoulders? It's just made no sense whatsoever. So tough end for the Eagles, but we'll talk about the team that moved on from that game in a sec. But let's start with the AFC. Texans at Ravens. The line is Ravens -9, ticking up towards 9.5 some spots. The total is 44. Looks like there will be no rain at this point in Baltimore, though there will be a chunk of wind. Should CJ Stroud ever be a 9-point dog, Drew?
Not by my numbers. I think what we've seen from him, not just in these high leverage last two games, but really over the balance of the season, as he's grown into the role of the starter in Houston, has been, top 10 quarterback level, clearly. And if you have a quarterback that can perform at that level in a playoff environment, even against a good defense, I think you're alive to score enough points to stay in contention here, stay in reach. I think fair here should be Ravens 7.5. So I'm happy to take 9.5 here. And I think ultimately won't be shocked if the Texans are, in this game or even win this game. We shouldn't be surprised by that. I think the playoffs field in general is pretty flat. And while it is notable that the Ravens are effectively at full strength now, kind of very carefully watching for Mark Andrews news. He was kind of identified as available to come off of IR quietly last week, and then would expect he's going to practice this week. If he goes, that's definitely a dimension in the Ravens offense that's worth paying attention to. Although in his absence, it kind of looked better. The passing offense at least had a little less predictability. Is that a thing? It did feel like Lamar kind of came into his own more in the final third of the season when Andrews wasn't out there. So that just, that doesn't really mean much, I don't think. I think it's more just Lamar and the offense kind of growing into, what was a new system that Todd Monken brought to the table for them. So, the Ravens offense is definitely going to probably determine this game one way or the other when it's all said and done. The Texans defense is not very good. We know this. And in general, I think the injuries that they have had over the final quarter of the season and the playoffs, could matter quite a lot. If they're not at full strength on the D line, if they have guys unavailable in terms of pass rush opportunities, then the Ravens pass protection should be pretty good here. And I think you could have Lamar in a situation where either they're playing from ahead pretty comfortably, or they in a comeback mode, they're able to get it done. In the back of my head, there's a birdie saying, hey, we need to see Lamar Jackson perform at at the same level we've seen in the regular season in the postseason, just as proof of concept that he can do it. I believe he can. But I kind of do need to see it to really have any confidence that the Ravens are a team that you want to be laying points with in the playoffs. Notable in his three, just frankly, in the 3 games we've seen from Lamar Jackson in a playoff setting, he hasn't been great. And I think, the 2 games we've seen from CJ Stroud, he's been ultimately, he's been incredible. If you want to include the game against Georgia last year, the 3 games we've seen from him, he's been, just on another level. So, it's not going to blow me away if that is sort of the setting for this game, and the Ravens have to, either claw their way back into it to get the win, or just can't find the right combination to get it home, because the Texans are playing with house money right now. They're a young team, and even though there are still some questions about who you have, in terms of weapons, Nico Collins has emerged as a true blue wide receiver 1, and Will Anderson, if he is right, can definitely generate some pressure, which could be a distinguishing factor here. So ultimately, I do think the Ravens will win and move on, but I like Texans plus the points, and I think this game probably lands inside or around 7.
Yep. I am not convinced that the Ravens have the better quarterback in this game. I'm not convinced there's a massive edge on that front. And also, I think that in the way that the Ravens closed the season, I mean, just throw out the Pittsburgh game in Week 18 because there wasn't a real game for them. But just with the way they close the season, I think now, if you ask the average NFL fan who the best team in the NFL is, most people would say Baltimore, because Baltimore happened to beat San Francisco in San Francisco. Now, obviously, the market will still tell you that San Francisco is the best team, but we're like 2 real games removed from the Ravens closing 6.5-point dogs in San Francisco. Like, this Ravens team, and I get that they were incredibly impressive in that game, though a large chunk of that was the fact that Brock Purdy threw 4 interceptions, 3 of them being tip balls, and Purdy imploded to the point where he just wasn't going to win that game the way that he was playing beyond the interceptions. And beating Miami, even though Miami kind of revealed themselves as frauds towards the end of the season and in their playoff game, still very impressive to be able to beat them 56-19. But, I mean, this is still the same Ravens team that really should have lost at home to the Rams in a game that they needed. They allowed Deshaun Watson, who had a fractured shoulder and a high ankle sprain, to complete every single pass in the second half at home and lose that game 33-31. They weren't super impressive against the Chargers in that Sunday night game. I think this is the best team in the AFC, but I think the idea that they are a tier above by themselves, a tier above the Bills and the Chiefs, I think that's probably wrong. I think they're closer to just the best team in a tier of those 3. I don't think they're better than the Niners, and they wouldn't be favored in the Super Bowl if that is the matchup. So I think this team is beatable. Now, I'm not sure that Houston, between the weaknesses that they have outside of Stroud, with just how injured they are on defense, with the offensive line not being great, with Stroud coming up against, and I know the Browns had an elite historic pass defense, but that wasn't the defense. They weren't the same defense by the end of the year with all their injuries. So this will obviously be Stroud's toughest test on the road, and there's a reason that the Ravens are favored by more than a touchdown, but certainly at 9, inching towards 9.5, the Texans would be the side here for me. Do you think that that's fair to question that the Ravens are perhaps not actually an all-world juggernaut?
I think it's 100% fair. I mean, I thought what I was saying was a little bit less fair, which is that there's speculation that Lamar Jackson is going to revert back to, the guy he was 3 years ago in the playoffs. Yeah, maybe he may have completely grown out of that. So it's tough to say what you're going to get there. But the idea that the Ravens have kind of risen just on the basis of finishing the season strong, and we haven't seen them play a stinker in a while. And for that reason alone, they're inflated. I think that is 100% fair. And I think that's giving you 2 free points in this one.
Yep. No, I like it. All right. Texans it is. Chiefs at Bills. This was the line that surprised me the most. I don't really understand this one. So the Bills are effectively 3-point favorites in this one. Pretty much most places are like -2.5, -120 on the Bills. The total is 46. This is the Sunday late game on CBS. I'm surprised this line is so big with just the amount of injuries that Buffalo took in that Monday game against Pittsburgh. Like, here are some of the guys out. Like, Terrell Bernard got carted off. He was effectively the Matt Milano replacement. They're already without Terrell Dodson, who, at least by PFF, is an absolute monster and one of the best linebackers in the sport this season. Dodson's backup, Balin Spector, did his back and got injured against the Steelers. So it was the AJ Klein show, who was not in the NFL a week ago. He may be the starting line. He probably will be the starting linebacker against the Chiefs. Christian Benford hurt his knee, did not come back in the game. Teron Johnson, who is an all-pro slot corner, he got concussed, I believe, for the second time this season, which puts him in serious doubt in a short turnaround. Rasul Douglas and Taylor Rapp, they didn't play already. It looks like Douglas will come back. And Gabe Davis wasn't able to go. Like, that is a ton of guys, and they're already missing Matt Milano and Trey Watt. Do you think that that's just the tipping point of not no return, but to the point where the Bills shouldn't be, effectively three-point favorites against Patrick Mahomes?
Yeah, I mean, you cataloged that well. The market has kind of come off of 3 at a lot of important places. It's 2.5 now, although juicy 2.5. One of the other kind of 2 wrinkles here, there's a 2-day rest advantage for Kansas City. They played Saturday. Bills played Monday. Bills are at home. And for whatever it's worth, the Chiefs performing well in Buffalo, making that crowd a little tight, taking a little bit of the home field advantage away. I could see it. But we're not that far removed from Buffalo going into Kansas City in the month of December, and Kansas City closed 1.5-point favorites. So at that time, you had kind of market consensus that the Bills were a better team, albeit a small margin better. And now here they are at home. And so I think 3 was a fair opener. And I think I thought at least there was a realistic scope that people were going to be excited about the outcome against the Pittsburgh Steelers, excited about the winning streak that they put together here. And you might even get, some sentiment that gave us a shot at 3.5 on Kansas City, because the Chiefs are the side that I really wanted in this contest. Now that it's kind of been bet down to 2.5, I'm really staring hard at my numbers, and I'm really refreshing. I'm going to be refreshing aggressively the injury information for the Buffalo Bills defense all week, because that is going to ultimately determine this game. Make zero mistake about what was responsible for the Bills' turnaround this season. It was their defensive replacement level players, specifically Dodson and Bernard, fortifying the second layer there, the second level, and just becoming better linebackers and better fits for what McDermott wanted to do with the defense. If those guys do not go, the Chiefs are going to have little resistance moving the ball in this contest, because if all you've got is a front 4 that can rush passer and create pressure, led by your interior guys who are kind of the most important of that unit, and you're up against the Chiefs defense that has one of the better interior pass protections in the NFL, and a quarterback in Mahomes who will scramble on a moment's notice in a playoff setting, you are in deep trouble if your linebacker core cannot hang. And that is kind of the key for this entire game. I cannot believe we are saying it, but a game involving Pat Mahomes and Josh Allen in the divisional round of the playoffs depends on the health of Terrell Dodson and Terrell Bernard. and that is obscene and wild and crazy, but it is the case. Linebackers, people used to joke, off-ball linebackers don't matter. They matter so much in this game. I can't really wrap my head around it. I agree that Douglas will go, but it's not like there's a wide receiver 1 for the Chiefs that you really want Douglas to kind of take off the field. I guess Rashee Rice would be that guy. He has emerged, but it's not like they target Rice to the degree where that like really impacts the Chiefs' ability to move the ball, I don't think. And you do have a decent, kind of way, kind of quality safeties at least to kind of help buckle up on Travis Kelce. So maybe this becomes a game where the Chiefs are most effective on the ground if the linebacking core is not good to go. But certainly the idea that the Chiefs can get a win in a high profile contest like this is wide open with the injuries that the Bills sustained yesterday. We're zeroing almost entirely on the Bills defense because again that's what really got them to this point in the season. It wasn't changing over from Ken Dorsey to Joe Brady, in my opinion. It wasn't Josh Allen cutting down on turnovers. He's still the same guy. But certainly the Chiefs defense is going to be a very tough test for this unit. You saw, I think, in the contest in December in Kansas City, the rushing attack for the Bills was awesomely effective in the first half of that game, and for weird reasons they went away from it, and it all kind of fell apart for them. And they barely hung on thanks to the offsides call on Kadarius Toney to get that one home. But so I think there's scope for some success here for the Bills on the ground. But the key I would kind of look to here is if both of these teams are largely leaning into the ground game, and that's where they're going to find the most success. Is 46 a fair total, or is 46 too high? And for me, if I only can take one bet into this game, knowing what we know now, and even saying that I'm concerned about one of these defenses and their health, I still think that this total is too high because this game could just be shortened on the basis of both of these teams largely being successful in the rushing attack and just in general, the clock ticking.
Yep. No, I think that's fair. And I think it's interesting about Bernard and Dodson, the idea of off-ball linebackers who, to your point, have been so marginalized. And I mean, the money ball approach, which Howie Roseman kind of embodies, is to just, disregard the value of, to disregard prioritizing off-ball linebackers and running backs, basically. Off-ball linebackers are the defense's equivalent of the running back in terms of how they're perceived. And you saw that so glaringly kind of targeted by particularly San Francisco in that Philly game where it's like, all right, well, yeah, we're just going to destroy your linebackers every day to the point where, I mean, one of the guys who was filling in for Philly got cut like 2 days later after that San Francisco game. And I think it's going to be a problem against a Chiefs offense that, to me, against Miami, looked as fixed as it's been all year. Like they should have scored 40 in that game, but they kept on shooting themselves in the foot and some high leverage plays went against them. And I understand that Miami is really banged up, but they still had some guys on the defense. And I think that's going to be a concern for Buffalo. I think it's also a concern that when these two teams played, and I know the Bills, they get closed only 1.5 point dogs, but like they were coming off the bye. Chiefs were coming off a road Sunday football game against the Packers. So I think that equalized things a bit. And Josh Allen was negative EPA per play in that game. Now, Patrick Mahomes is also negative EPA per play in that game. But if the Bills are missing half their defense, then you would think that there is probably more scope for Mahomes to improve upon that. I worry as someone who needs the Bills in this game that we're going to see like a lot of James Cook and a lot of running the ball against Kansas City and a lot of runs on 2nd and 9. And it's going to be infuriating and it's going to be too late until they finally take the chains off and just let Josh go to work. I think that the Miami game was also another data point to the idea that Mahomes just has another gear in the playoffs, which is, usually saying that is a kind of easy pundit talking point, but with Mahomes, I think there's a lot of evidence to suggest that is a real statistical thing, that in games where he's an underdog or the spread is under 3, he just goes to another level, whether that's a focus thing, whether it's a play calling thing or just dialing up more pass plays and putting more on Mahomes' plate, whether it's more willingness to sacrifice his body on these scrambles. Now, a lot of the same stuff applies to Allen. I just think Mahomes is better than Allen, and I think that his gear is probably higher. And if the Bills are seriously banged up on defense and the Chiefs then have the better defense and I think the Bills have the slightly better offense, but I don't trust the play calling as much on Buffalo's side. So I agree with you on the under, and I lean Chiefs right now at the spread.
So we're ready for a 6th year in a row AFC Championship game in Kansas City. Is that where we're at?
That would be something. Yeah, the incumbent hagiographic figure against the next Jesus and CJ Stroud could be coming. But no, I'm very concerned about my Bills, who I was feeling really good about going to the Steelers game. Just these injuries, like sometimes you just reach the point of no return, and I just worry that we're going to be seeing AJ Klein trying to cover a streaking Rashee Rice on a slant route that goes 70 yards to the house. It's a little bit of a concern. And I know Klein was fine against the Steelers, but it's like fine against Mason Rudolph is not going to necessarily be fine against Patrick Mahomes. I don't think that guy has that guy has any prayer in coverage. So that's going to be a problem. All right. Before we get into the last game, the Lions are looking to continue their storybook season, Drew, and they can advance to the NFC Championship game with a win over Baker Mayfield and the Bucs. Coverage of the divisional round matchup in Detroit begins at 2 p.m. Eastern on NBC and Peacock. All right, the Lions, the opener was 6. It's already ticked up to Lions minus 6.5. The total is a massive 48.5. 2 former number 1 picks not playing for the teams that drafted them. Storylines galore. On paper, like Bucs-Lions, if you were told this is going to be the divisional round matchup back in week 8, you would have been, NBC probably would have been pretty upset. But the way that's broken, I think this is a pretty good matchup. A total of 48.5, which implies that this is going to be something resembling a shootout. Lots of storylines.
Yeah.
Baker Mayfield in the NFC title game, which is incredible when you think about where he was at in preseason, where he was at in like week 9 as well. This is unfathomable, but I think the Bucs, they've showed a gear against the Eagles, and really in the last 6 weeks of the season, if you throw out the Carolina game because Baker was hobbled, that suggests that they're going to be able to score against the Detroit defense. That look, and I don't think that Baker Mayfield is actually, a superstar quarterback who's going to be able to light up the Niners and the Ravens, but I think he can probably light up Detroit. Do you think 6.5 points is too many here?
No, I think it's right. I think it should be, yeah. And like the Baker Mayfield part of it is fascinating because you're right. Like in the preseason, they were threatening to take away his job and give it to Kyle Trask. And I think last night on the broadcast, I kind of did like a triple take when they put up the fact that Todd Bowles is the 8th head coach that he has played for. How is that possible? This is number 8 for him. But I will say that just in general, what they're getting out of, the skill position players right now, like it's not going to be enough, I don't think. Yes, I will acknowledge that Rachaad White has been a huge breath of fresh air for a running attack that could do nothing last year. And yes, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin are, guys that have a gear that makes it tough on any defense, and they're going up against a soft Lions core. Like, you were in a pretty friendly environment last night, guys, and you were playing against a team that couldn't tackle. And I lost count of drops at like 7 in that game. Like there were so many lost opportunities where the ball hit the ground against and you're at home in a primetime comfortable environment. So it was a little shocking to see, and I think ultimately if those guys aren't sharper against the Detroit Lions, then number one, this total is not getting there, and number two, I don't think they're covering. Ultimately, the fact that the Bucs got to play from a positive game state last night was huge because in general their pass protection is good, but up against kind of really truly elite players, they have broken down at times this season. They haven't faced many tough pass rushes this season, and I do like what you're seeing right now out of the Lions defense in terms of pass rush. So just in general, I think this is if you miss the 5.5 on the open, if you miss the 6 on the open, 6.5 I think is still a tiny edge to bet the Linos. And the defense for the Buccaneers is pretty much at full strength. Like this is the unit that they wanted to go to war with. This is the unit that Todd Bowles, and he's calling the defense that he wants to call. Like it's a blitz heavy packages, and just in general, kind of leaves his cornerbacks on islands. And that can get you into trouble. Devontae Smith was having and whatever he wanted last night. And while he is, yes, an outstanding receiver, he still, he won. Number one was in the wide receiver one role and was getting whatever he wanted. And number two, I think with a little bit more creative scheming, going from Brian Johnson to a Ben Johnson scheme, I think you could be in a little bit of trouble with your cornerbacks on islands if your blitz heavy, defense isn't getting home. And I really just don't see it getting home against the Lions pass pro as currently constituted. So I think Jared Goff, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Reynolds, Williams, Laporta, these guys should have a lot of success through the air in this contest. Jahmyr Gibbs is coming into his own. He looks fresh. He looks very, very dangerous. The fact that you have a double-edged sword, balanced pass and run right now for the Lions, I think is very, very effective. And ultimately, this has the whiffs of the Lions, kind of popping the bubble on the Bucs. Bucs go home as double-digit losers, and Lions move into an NFC Championship game where they could potentially be wildly overrated.
Yes, I think that's fair. It's hard to remember because back when these two teams played back in week 6, I don't think anyone thought that this was going to be a divisional round preview, but they did play back in week 6, and the Lions absolutely destroyed Tampa Bay, and I think it's instructive the manner in which they did it. So they won by 14. They won 20-6 in Tampa. And the way that they did it was, so they couldn't run the ball at all. And now there was no Jahmyr Gibbs in that game, but the Lions ran for 1.8 yards per carry. And it didn't matter because Jared Goff was 30-44 for 353 yards and 2 touchdowns, 74.3 QBR, which I think would have been the best in the NFL across a full season. So they lit them up through the air. And then on the other side, Mayfield couldn't do anything. He was 19-37, threw a pick, no touchdowns. They couldn't get anything going, which is, I think, it doesn't bode particularly well. Now, they were a different and worse team at that point, the Bucs, and the Lions are probably of a somewhat similar quality to how they were then when they were 5-1. So I think this game is going to be closer than that. But I think the way to attack this game is that I don't think the Lions are going to have a ton of success running the ball. I think this Bucs rushing defense, as it has been for years, is a really strong unit, and the Lions weren't able to have any success the first time around. So I think this is going to be a Goff game, to your point. And he is opened at 264.5 passing yards. For me, that's way too low. And I would look at stuff like, if you like the Lions in this game, like you can back Goff 325 plus, Lions alt spread -9.5. It's like 11-1, and that happened in the first game when they played. So I think there is scope for Goff going heavily over and the Lions kind of lighting them up, and Baker Mayfield having to play from behind, and Baker Mayfield dropping back with Aiden Hutchinson pinning his ears back, knowing that it's going to skew pass, I think is a problem for Tampa Bay. Now, the one concern is that I get nervous when a team is this heavily favored and it's on the shoulders of Jared Goff, who I think is going to have to play well in this game. You would much rather, I think, if you're a Lions fan, you probably prefer a defense that's profile skews the other way, where it's a softer run defense and the Lions can just run all over you, because that just kind of produces a more stable, less variable outcome in terms of how their offense is going to operate. And if Goff just has these bad games, like he can just have games like he did against the Bears late in the season, or even at home in a dome against the Packers defense, which isn't good at all, where he just completely submarines you. Now, I think it's a good sign that he was able to play really well against the Rams. And by my numbers, if there's one bet to make in the Super Bowl market right now, it's actually Detroit plus 900, which I don't feel great about. But I just think that the fact that, one, they're 6.5 point favorites in this game. Two, very big thing for Jared Goff is that the Super Bowl is in a dome. That's massive for him, given that how poorly he plays outdoors relative to when the conditions aren't a factor. So I'm with you. I think that the Lions are the side. It makes me nervous when Goff is going to be the key to everything.
Here's one thing to kind of give you a little bit of a, I guess maybe a little confidence in Goff, right? when you think of blitz heavy defensive schemes, right?
Yeah.
Tampa Bay should come to mind. Who else should come to mind is the Minnesota Vikings. And Goff got to play the Vikings twice in like the last 4 weeks. And so this is not going to be something new. And in general, I think the Buccaneers are not as effective blitzing as the Vikings. And the Lions pass pro held up perfectly well in those 2 games. And I thought Goff did perfectly fine. So ultimately, this game will come down to the scheme that Ben Johnson has, and the route running and the just the playmaking of the Lions wide receivers. And if you're telling me I got to go to war with St. Brown, Raymond, and Williams and Laporta against this unit of pass defenders, I'm looking at Lions alt spreads, honestly.
Yep. No, I don't mind that, and I think that the Bucs defense is going to be overvalued by people after what they did against Philadelphia. I think that was such a strange, fluky context where they had 10 unblocked pressures in that game, which is the most any team has had in a game all season. Hurts faced quick pressure the most he has, I believe, in his entire career. And they were just blitzing time and time again. Eagles would go empty, Bucs blitz, and they just had no answer. It's like, I'm not sure if that was, it has to be a combination, a scheme thing, and then also just no one outside of Devontae Smith could get open quickly as a blitz beater. And just Hurts, I think Hurts is so in his own head at this point where there were plays where like he's looking at Devontae Smith is open, and he just doesn't throw the ball. Like it just seems like he's just there's just something off in the wiring. And I think that between Ben Johnson's scheme, between the ability of guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams and Sam Laporta, their ability to get open quickly, I think the Bucs are going to be in trouble. If to your point, I think could look a lot like the Vikings games. And by the way, yes, Vikings and Tampa are both blitz heavy teams. Vikings are also just the better defense.
They are, yes, I agree.
So I think it's going to be a problem, and I think that the way that this goes south for Detroit is if Goff just has a Goff implosion game, and anything outside of that, and they should be pretty comfortable in this one. Okay, we are done. Don't forget to check out NBCSports.com for more information to help you with your wagers. Thanks to those watching on the NBC Sports YouTube channel. If you're listening to us in podcast form, don't forget to rate and subscribe. And also a reminder to find all your favorite NBC Sports shows on Amazon Music. Just head to amazon.com/NBC Sports. From Jay Croucher and Drew Dinsick, we'll see you soon.